This isn't the Rose Bowl anybody expected. The top-ranked, undefeated Michigan Wolverines are less than 3 years removed from a sudden, unwanted change at head coach. Now, they're playing for the program's first national championship in 49 years. Pac-10 champion Washington State, meanwhile, is making their third Rose Bowl appearance in school history. It's been 67 years since they were here on New Year's Day. Both teams boast a Heisman Trophy finalist. Wazoo's is a prolific quarterback destined for the highest reaches of the NFL draft after besting every meaningful Cougars passing record set only a few years ago by 1993's #1 overall pick, Drew Bledsoe. Michigan's is a cornerback. The first primarily defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy, his impact can hardly be measured by the box score, despite his spectacular contributions in all three phases of the game. Both head coaches, separated in age by less than a year, have taken long roads to the most important game of their lives. Russell Athletics still sponsors major college programs. Welcome to January 1st, 1998. Michigan isn't supposed to be here. The mid-90s weren't kind to the Wolverines. While the talent level remained as strong as it had been under Bo Schembechler, the same success had not followed. In the 5 seasons from 1988 to 1992, Michigan had won 5 Big Ten championships, 4 of them outright. They lost only 9 games in that span, which covered the transition from Schembechler to his longtime offensive coordinator, Gary Moeller. Then the Wolverines finished with 4 losses in each of the 4 seasons from 1993 to 1996. They never finished better than a tie for 3rd in the Big Ten and toured the conference's B-tier bowl games. The nadir occurred in the spring of 1994. After drinking to excess at a restaurant in Southfield, Gary Moeller made a scene. It ended with charges for disorderly conduct and assault and battery after he reportedly punched a police officer in the chest. 6 days after the incident, an embarrassed Moeller resigned his post. Athletic director Joe Roberson named longtime defensive assistant Lloyd Carr as interim head coach. A former quarterback at Northern Michigan, Carr spent his early coaching years at the high school level, an experience that profoundly shaped the social studies teacher, before he eventually joined Schembechler's staff as a defensive backs coach in 1980. He ascended to defensive coordinator in 1987 and earned a reputation as arguably the best recruiter on staff. Carr accepted the job reluctantly. Moeller was the best man at his wedding. What would be a celebratory achievement for so many was a mournful one for Carr, who said he'd, quote, give this up in a minute to work under his old friend again. The mere thought of moving into Moeller's office brought tears to his eyes. The promotion also garnered plenty of skepticism. Carr hadn't been a head coach since 1975, when he helmed Westland John Glenn High School. In the short time between Moeller's arrest and Carr's introductory press conference, the rumor mill produced the likes of Auburn's Terry Bowden, Colorado coach and former Schembechler assistant Bill McCartney, and even Schembechler himself as potential successors to Moeller. Roberson, for his part, denied those rumors, but he couldn't hold off speculation that he'd eventually replace Carr with a better regarded up-and-coming coach, like former Michigan wide receivers coach Cam Cameron, Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator Tony Dungy, or Youngstown State head coach Jim Tressel. Carr won his first game in incredible fashion, with Mercury Hayes' touchdown catch as time expired against Virginia, capping the biggest comeback in school history. Following an 8-2 start, Roberson removed the interim tag, making Carr the permanent head coach. Michigan fell the following week to Penn State. They finished on a skid of 3 losses over the team's last 5 games. While that stretch included an upset win over undefeated Ohio State, thanks to Tim Biakabatuka's 313-yard rushing bonanza, the end of the season still left a bitter aftertaste. An ugly Alamo Bowl loss to 19th-ranked Texas A&M prompted junior defensive tackle William Carr to tell the Michigan Daily, quote, "If this link is destroyed, you're messing with tradition. Our class has come in and put a dent in the chain." In the offseason, Biakabatuka left early for the NFL. Unfortunately, the 1996 season followed a nearly identical script. The Wolverines started the season 7-1, then lost 3 of their last 4 games, including a sleepy Outback Bowl versus Alabama. The lone win in that span? Another toppling of the #1 Buckeyes, this time in Columbus. Don't expect the unexpected. Michigan mired in mediocrity headlined the front page of the Daily after the bowl game. It wasn't a surprise that Michigan entered 1997 to little fanfare. Despite returning 8 starters on offense and 7 from the nation's number 8 scoring defense, they ranked 14th in the preseason AP poll. Penn State, with All-American candidate Curtis Enis at running back and 6 future NFL players starting on defense, topped the rankings, while Ohio State placed 9th. Enis graced the cover of Sporting News' preview magazine. Michigan also made the cover, but the only reason any Wolverine would hang this on their wall was motivation. Michigan answered the cover's question about as strongly as they could. While Carr had overseen hot starts before, this felt different. New defensive coordinator Jim Herman installed a more aggressive scheme than the bend-but-don't-break units of the previous couple years under Greg Madison, who had left in the offseason for Notre Dame. The Wolverines opened the season against 8th-ranked Colorado, a team they'd beaten in a 1-score game the previous year. There was no such drama this time around. Herman's defense yielded only 224 yards, intercepted the Buffaloes 4 times, including a spectacular leaping pick by Woodson, and produced 8 tackles for loss, 4 by defensive end Glenn Steele. The 27-3 blowout set the tone for the season. The defense quickly established itself as the most fearsome in the country. With Woodson locking down half the field on his own, the rest of the secondary enthusiastically jumped passing lanes, if the quarterback could even get a throw-off in the first place. With every additional jaw-dropping play, Woodson established himself as the best defensive player in the country. Running against the Steele-led front 7 proved no more successful. The Michigan defense ranked in the top 10 nationally, and usually the top 1, in every major statistical category. In 11 regular season games, they allowed 10 touchdowns and intercepted 22 passes. Opponents managed only 3.4 yards per play. The team displayed resilience. When they lost senior captain Eric Mays to a season-ending knee injury, Dahani Jones filled in at middle linebacker with aplomb, while Mays maintained his role as a locker room leader. The running back group of veterans Chris Howard and Clarence Williams, blue-chip freshman Anthony Thomas, and mean-ass fullback Chris Floyd established a strong ground game behind an offensive line led by future NFL stalwarts Jeff Backus, Chris Hutchinson, and John Jansen. The punishment they laid on opponents complemented both Michigan's defense and a low-risk passing game that proved just dangerous enough to make teams pay for loading up the box. By mid-November, the Wolverines had climbed to number 4 in the polls. On November 8th, they faced their greatest challenge yet, a road trip to face preseason darlings Penn State, which had shown a little wobble against Ohio State and Northwestern, but still entered the game as undefeated favorites. With top 5 teams Florida State and North Carolina squaring off and number 1 Nebraska facing a tricky road trip to Missouri, ABC dubbed this Judgment Day. But what projected to be a tight contest centered on the battle between All-American back Curtis Enis and the Michigan front 7 quickly turned lopsided. The Wolverines ran all over the Penn State defense, bottled up Enis, put Woodson firmly in the Heisman conversation with a shockingly easy receiving touchdown, and generally put the Nittany Lions in hell for the afternoon. Michigan ran their lead up to 34-0 before Enos scored the first fourth-quarter touchdown the defense had given up all season. outgained PSU with 416 yards to their 169. Even though Florida State topped UNC 20-3, Nebraska required a miracle and patently illegal touchdown to pull out an overtime win at Mizzou, and the Wolverines emerged as the nation's newly minted #1 team. A victory at Wisconsin set up a rivalry showdown with #4 Ohio State. The Buckeyes had lost only to Penn State in 1997 and had revenge on their minds after back-to-back years of heartbreak at the hands of the Wolverines. Instead, it was the Charles Woodson Heisman Showcase. First, he echoed 1991 winner Desmond Howard.
But he gets it out all right. Oh, my goodness, look at this. He runs Woodson all the way back to the 22-yard line. Woodson's got one block, and another block. One more, and he's gone. Touchdown, no flags.
Woodson added a long reception that was a fingertip tackle away from another touchdown and sealed a 20-14 win by intercepting Stanley Jackson in the end zone. Michigan was on their way to Pasadena. But first, Woodson stopped by New York to pick up some hardware. Washington State isn't supposed to be here. This is the program's third ever Rose Bowl appearance, a far cry from Michigan's 17. Remember that preseason AP poll? The Cougars received a solitary vote for 25th. Mike Price's team couldn't be overlooked, however. The son of a football coach, Price grew up in Washington, played 2 years at WSU, and had stints as a graduate assistant and running backs coach in Pullman before becoming their head coach in 1989. When Price was hired, the Cougars had made 3 bowl games in the previous 72 years. Following a 3-year acclimation period, he'd now led them to 3 bowl appearances in 6 seasons. A renowned offensive play caller, Price first broke through in Pullman with quarterback Drew Bledsoe, who'd go on to be a Pro Bowl quarterback for the New England Patriots. While the last couple years hadn't been as fruitful, Price carried high hopes for the '97 Cougars, even though the media picked them to finish 7th in the Pac-10. Price was right to be optimistic. In 6'5", 238-pound junior Ryan Leaf, he had the ideal quarterback to operate his spread-to-pass system, and he surrounded his signal caller with speedy skill players. In an era when most teams still deployed a fullback, Wazoo often operated with 4 or even 5 wide receivers on the field at once. A career day from Leaf and a goal line stand secured a season-opening win over conference contender UCLA. The following week, the Cougars beat USC in Los Angeles for the first time since 1957, marking the first time in program history they defeated both LA schools in the same season. Leaf put together a campaign rivaled only by Tennessee's Peyton Manning among 1997's college football quarterbacks. He set Pac-10 single-season passing records with 3,637 yards and 33 touchdowns, while adding 6 more scores on the ground. He finished second nationally in passer efficiency to UCLA's Cade McNown, who attempted 92 fewer passes than Leaf. Leaf could shrug off pass rushers and make plays outside the pocket, letting Price put all those wideouts on the field without fear. Their quintet of receivers, who borrowed the Fab Five nickname, each recorded at least 30 receptions or 6 touchdowns. Running back Michael Black forced defenses to pay attention to the other guy in the backfield, too, by posting over 1,300 all-purpose yards. While the defense was a far cry from Michigan's, they weren't bereft of talent either. Senior linemen Leon Bender and Dorian Boose would each be selected in the second round of the 1998 NFL Draft, while sophomore linebackers Steve Gleason and freshman safety Lamont Thompson were also future pros. Wazoo's 44-31 loss at Arizona State represented the only blemish on the regular season record. A back-and-forth 41-35 Apple Cup triumph over Washington secured a tie for the conference title with UCLA. The season-opening head-to-head victory gave the Rose Bowl tiebreaker to the Cougs. Leaf finished third in the Heisman race, behind Woodson and Manning, and ahead of Marshall receiver Randy Moss. And so, after some very 90s photo ops, we've reached New Year's Day in Pasadena. The iconic Keith Jackson is calling the game for ABC. The Georgia native with the sonorous baritone has deep connections on both sidelines. Jackson's broadcasting career began when he became a speech communications major as an undergrad at Washington State. More recently, he's become the unofficial voice of Michigan football. He coined Michigan Stadium's nickname the Big House, complimented Desmond Howard's 1991 punt return with the perfect "Hello Heisman" call, and was a good bet to announce any UM game of significance. The Rose Bowl was his 6th Michigan game of the 1997 season and 4th in a row. Jackson's partner in the press box is Hall of Fame quarterback Bob Griese, who is receiving more attention than usual for his role as a broadcaster. That's because Michigan's starting quarterback is his youngest son, Brian, whom he raised as a single father after his first wife and Brian's mother, Judy, passed away from breast cancer in 1988. According to Sports Illustrated, Brian passed up scholarship offers from Texas and his father's alma mater, Purdue, to walk on at Michigan in 1993. He started 9 games in 1995, including the upset over Ohio State, after touted redshirt freshman Scott Dreisbach injured his thumb. Griese needed to climb his way back up the depth chart, however, when he was arrested the following spring for reportedly smashing the front window of campus bar scorekeepers after being asked to leave. Dreisbach quarterbacked the Wolverines through 1996 until halftime of the Ohio State game, when Griese replaced the ineffective young gun and threw the game's only touchdown. Griese maintained his edge on the competition, which also included young hotshots Tom Brady, who turned down home state USC and UCLA for Michigan in 1995, and Jason Kapsner, the number 2 pro-style quarterback in the 1996 class, and beat out Dreisbach to start the 1997 opener. His near-flawless performance against Colorado dispelled any notion of an open competition. When called upon, Griese made timely plays, rarely committed major errors, and forged a strong connection with tight end Jeremy Tooman. If there's a signature offensive play from Mike DeBoard's 1997 offense, it's the play-action waggle from Griese to Tooman, which pulled the team out of a couple of tight spots. After such a roller coaster few years, Griese's 3rd win over Ohio State was particularly gratifying. The 5th-year senior had earned his flowers. The scene in Pasadena could hardly be more picturesque. Jackson sets the stage, focusing on the matchup between Michigan's stingy pass defense and Ryan Leaf, whom he calls a problem. Jackson was always ahead of his time. If he can beat this defense today, he's the best in the country, says Bob Griese. On the game's opening drive, it's clear Leaf has already forced Michigan to make major alterations to that defense. Instead of their usual shifted 3-4, the Wolverines play much of the game in a light dime package with 6 defensive backs, 1 inside linebacker, 1 true defensive tackle, and an outside linebacker often lining up at defensive end. Woodson wins his first encounter with Leaf, blitzing from the slot to force a 3rd down incompletion. After Wazoo punts, Griese arm punts a desperate shot to Chris Howard, and Lamont Thompson nabs his 6th interception in the last 3 games. As more punting ensues, the Cougars gain ground in the battle for field position. Leaf capitalizes, throwing and running for first downs before finding Kevin McKenzie open between zones for the game's first score. After another defensive stop, Washington State threatens to blow the game open early, moving deep into Michigan territory with long completions to Sean McWashington and Chris Jackson. Jim Herman dials up the aggression, rushing 7 defenders at Leaf. Last-second pressure from Woodson, again, is just enough to meddle with Leaf's release and avoid a wide-open touchdown. 2 plays later, Woodson drops into coverage.
Here they come again. Rolling out. Intercepted. Charles Woodson.
Leaf thought he had McKenzie open for a touchdown, He either lost sight of Woodson or underestimated his athleticism. Either way, Michigan has new life. While they go 3 and out for the second time on the ensuing possession, another punt at least resets the field for the defense. James Hall and Glenn Steele converge on Leaf to push the Cougars farther back. Then Woodson reverses field on the punt return and gets the corner to give the offense their best opening field position of the afternoon. Offensive coordinator Mike DeBoer dials up a deep shot to number 1 receiver Ty Streets, who draws a pass interference on Ray Jackson, brother of Cougars receiver Chris, and no relation to the member of the real Fab Five. During the 1997 season, Michigan's deep passing game was mostly notable for its absence. They'd completed only 9 passes of 30-plus yards in 11 regular season games, and only 3 had gone to full-time wide receivers, equal to the number accounted for by Woodson alone. So, naturally, after a failed end-around for Woodson, DeBoer tries it again.
And Brian Greasy drops, gets his pass in the air for Ty Streets, and he's got it, and he's gone. Touchdown, Michigan.
With a beautiful double move, Streets won his route against Jackson, whom the coaching staff had clearly circled in the game plan. The 53-yard reception ties Jeremy Tuman for the longest by a Wolverine this season. A dinged-up Michael Black watches from the sideline as Michigan's defense turns up the heat. Friendly fire prevents James Whitley from intercepting Leaf, who can't shake off Josh Williams and friends to put any more points on the board in the first half. The Wolverines can't add to their total either. The teams enter the locker room knotted at 7. While the score is in Michigan's preferred range, the halftime stats show neither squad is exactly in their comfort zone. Wazoo is out-rushing Michigan. Greasy is out-passing Leaf. Everyone is tense. On the opening drive of the second half, DeBoer continues his attempts to establish Woodson on offense, to no avail. Michigan punts from deep, really deep, in Cougar territory, and the conservative approach appears to pay off when the coverage team downs the ball at the 1. Facing the nation's top defense, Leaf and the Fab Five go to work. Catches by McWashington, Jackson, and McKenzie set up Washington State in the red zone, where Price makes the perfect play call.
Put it on the 14, make it a first down. Here they come with reversing the ball. It's Sean Timms into the corner. Touchdown!
While James Hall leaps the line to block Ryan Lindell's extra point, this is still only the 3rd time all season, and the first since facing Iowa on October 18th, that Michigan has faced a second-half deficit. It doesn't last long. Howard churns out a couple critical 3rd and shorts. Then DeBoer calls for a play-action shot to the suddenly unguardable Streets.
Greasy rolls out, still got it, lets it go big for Ty Streets. Touchdown!
Even though Greasy took a substantial hit as Streets got behind the defense, he put the ball in the perfect spot. With the extra point, the Wolverines take their first lead. We have to update the graphic. Leaf moves Wazoo out to midfield, only for Woodson and Jones to snuff out some conservative runs. Michigan gets the ball in the waning moments of the 3rd quarter and finally embarks on a Michigan-like drive. They mix run and pass, convert 3 straight 3rd downs, and keep Leaf off the field for several minutes. Chris Floyd bludgeons his way to a first down in scoring territory. 2 plays later, the Wolverines run their signature play to perfection.
Play action throws, he's got Truman open, touchdown!
14 plays, 77 yards, 5 minutes and 25 seconds, 21-13. Through hell, high water, and a Josh Williams sack, Leaf is determined to strike back. He steps away from pressure to find McKenzie for 19 yards, then somehow lobs a perfect ball to backup running back DeJuan Gilmore through a rib-rattling steal hit for 42. Tahani Jones thwarts a pump and go, however, and a relentless effort from freshman defensive back James Whitley forces Leaf to the bench for a Lindell field goal attempt, which is true from 48 yards. Up 5 points with 7:25 to play, Michigan goes into clock-killing mode. Keeping both sides on a knife's edge, the Wolverines again convert 3 consecutive third down attempts, 2 on gains by Woodson. 3 Howard runs only gain 3 yards, but force Price to use all 3 timeouts. Lloyd Carr lets the clock tick to 39 seconds before using a timeout and sending out the field goal unit. What would be a 47-yard field goal is actually a pooch punt by long-distance kicker Jay Feely, who pins the Cougars inside their own 10 without needing any assistance after the snap. Leaf's first 2 passes fall incomplete. A dire situation looks to be getting worse when Woodson camps under Leaf's third down bomb, only for Nyan Taylor to use whatever means necessary to come up with the ball. Michigan is irate. The official nearest the play went so far as to pull the flag out of his pocket, then change course and signal the catch with the flag still in hand. If Washington State finds a way to win, the end of the Rose Bowl and the national championship itself will be marred by controversy. Carr can only look on as a hook and lateral goes all the way to the 26, though Jason Clayton doesn't get out of bounds. Leaf has time for one more snap.
You better be ready to go when the chains are put down. Hook and lateral. You got 1 play left. He's under center, spikes it. Clock shows time has run out. What does the referee say? I'm waiting.
It's over. Amid the confusion is a sea of elated Wolverines and indignant Cougars, some of whom will not, to this day, get over the final play. Nobody talks about Taylor's catch. That would ruin the narrative. The post-game festivities begin with bewildering speed. Lynn Swann pulls Michigan players, including an awestruck Brian Griese, on stage next to the AP National Championship trophy. The team is already adorned in national champion hats and shirts. Lloyd Carr looks, for a moment, like the weight of the world has been lifted off his shoulders. And finally, a moment.
The MVP in today's ball game. You want to know who it is? I'm standing alongside his proud daddy, quarterback Brian Griese of Michigan. What a year he's had. Changed his whole life. You got lost, me. I don't blame you. You want to cry, you go ahead. I'll hold you up. That's shake, Griese. You guys got me crying.